You're standing right in the middle of a tense disagreement. Suddenly, the other person aggressively raises their voice and steps closer. They say something that clearly crosses a deeply personal boundary. You know you should immediately stand up and fiercely defend yourself. You have a dozen perfect, sharp arguments waiting in your head. But instead of getting angry, you do absolutely nothing at all. Your jaw firmly locks up and your throat goes completely tight. Your mind instantly goes blank, wiped entirely clean of all thoughts. You just stare right back at them, perfectly and completely silent. Later on, you replay the exact moment while standing in the shower. You feel incredibly weak and embarrassed for not speaking up today. You deeply wonder why you always just shut down under heavy pressure. But this sudden silence is not a failure of human courage. It certainly isn't a deeply ingrained personality flaw either. It is actually a highly evolved, ancient biological survival tactic. To understand why you go quiet, we have to look far backward. Way backward, long before arguments ever happened over a text message. In the ancient world, threats were never passive-aggressive corporate emails. Real threats had sharp teeth, heavy claws, and incredibly lethal intentions. Your brain evolved a very specific alarm system to keep you alive, and that exact same ancient alarm system is running right now. It literally cannot tell the difference between a predator and a yelling boss. When someone gets aggressive, your brain has to make a split-second choice. It chooses strictly based on what it thinks will keep you breathing. And very often, its absolute favorite choice is total, absolute silence. Enter a tiny almond-shaped cluster sitting deep inside your brain. This is your amygdala, the human body's ultimate biological threat detector. It acts exactly like a smoke alarm that simply cannot be reasoned with. When an argument gets heated, the amygdala quickly trips the security wire. Instantly, it cuts off all power to your brain's prefrontal cortex. That is the rational, talking, complex, problem-solving part of your mind. Careful logic is entirely too slow when you are in mortal danger. So, the brain aggressively reroutes all energy to basic survival reflexes. We all clearly know the very famous fight or flight response. Your heart actively races, getting ready to throw a punch or sprint away. If you get furious and yell back, that is the literal fight response. You are actively trying to physically overpower the perceived incoming threat. But fight or flight is truly only half of the evolutionary story. What happens if the angry predator is significantly bigger than you? What if fighting back will only guarantee that you permanently lose? Your tiny amygdala calculates this dark math in a fraction of a millisecond. If fighting or running is impossible, it desperately hits the emergency brake. It completely bypasses anger and drops straight to the very next option. It drops you into a profound, heavy state of physical shutdown. Clinical psychologists call this sudden, quiet shutdown the freeze response. To understand how it works, we heavily rely on polyvagal theory. Developed by Dr. Stephen Porges, it deeply maps out the human vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a massive information superhighway running through your entire body. It controls how your heart and lungs react to safety and deep danger. When you feel totally safe, you are in the ventral vagal state. You can freely smile, make easy eye contact, and hold a calm conversation. When sudden danger appears, you forcefully jump into the sympathetic nervous system. This is the loud, frantic, highly energetic fight or flight danger zone. But if the danger is overwhelming, you violently fall into the dorsal vagal state. This is the oldest, most strictly primitive defense mechanism we possess. Think of a wild possum actively playing dead to avoid being eaten alive. A hungry predator is deeply triggered by sudden movement and loud noise. If you stay perfectly still and silent, the predator might simply lose interest. Your dorsal vagal nerve literally forces your resting heart rate to slow down. It physically restricts your breathing and actively numbs your vocal cords. Your brain totally turns off your ability to speak firmly on purpose. It desperately wants you to be as physically uninteresting as humanly possible. So when you go blank during an argument, you aren't being stupid at all. Your body is successfully executing a completely flawless, play dead survival routine. It is silently hoping the angry person will simply turn and walk away. You are actively surviving the only way your deepest nervous system truly knows how. But there is another major reason your spoken words suddenly vanish. It directly has to do with how much data your body can successfully process. Dr. John Gottman clinically calls this exact biological phenomenon flooding. Flooding happens when extreme emotional stress physically overwhelms your entire nervous system. During a fierce shouting argument, your heart rate can violently skyrocket upward. Once it firmly crosses 100 beats per minute, something incredibly strange happens. Your body officially enters a distinct state of diffuse physiological arousal. This is just a highly clinical way of saying your internal engine is redlining. Heavy stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline completely flood your bloodstream. When you are fully flooded, you genuinely suffer temporary mild hearing loss. You literally cannot hear the subtle, gentle nuances in someone's angry voice. Your peripheral vision instantly narrows down into a very tight, dark tunnel, and your cognitive ability to form complex sentences evaporates completely into thin air. Your mouth goes utterly quiet because the brain's speech center is fully offline. Trying to argue while flooded is like driving a speeding car without a steering wheel. The heavy silence isn't a sign that you are badly losing the argument. It is a biological circuit breaker deliberately tripping to protect the entire house. Your body is aggressively forcing you to take an immediate silent time out. It desperately needs the heart rate to drop before the brain can safely reboot. Until that happens, no productive words are ever going to reliably come out. So the quiet is actually successfully preventing you from doing significantly more damage. There is one final critical layer to this sudden, extremely frustrating silence. Sometimes going entirely quiet isn't a freeze at all. It is actually a fawn. Fawning is the recognized fourth trauma response alongside fight, flight, and freeze. It is the deep psychological instinct to quietly appease an aggressor, to stay entirely safe. If arguing back simply makes them angrier, your ancient brain strongly remembers that. It quickly learns that your own personal anger is highly dangerous to your survival. So it aggressively swallows your anger before you can even consciously feel it. It immediately replaces it with quiet, submissive compliance to heavily keep the peace. You deliberately become silent so you don't add dangerous fuel to their roaring fire. You quietly absorb their intense heat to successfully end the conflict as fast as possible. This is extremely common if you grew up around highly unpredictable, angry adults. You learned very early on that being completely invisible was the safest daily bet. Your absolute silence simply became a perfectly designed, bulletproof emotional shield. So the very next time you find yourself entirely frozen in a bitter argument, when the angry words are deeply stuck in your tight throat like thick glue, and your anxious mind goes completely, utterly, and terrifyingly blank, please stop aggressively beating yourself up for not being significantly louder. Stop relentlessly telling yourself that you are incredibly weak or a pathetic coward. You are absolutely not failing to adequately protect yourself from harm. Your body is actively protecting you with a deep, ancient, and silent magic. It is powerfully pulling the emergency brake when the dark road gets entirely too dangerous. It is successfully playing dead, so the impending danger will safely pass you by. Your exhausted nervous system is truly just trying to bring you safely home alive. Once the clear threat is gone, the spoken words will always eventually come back. The rational thinking brain will fully power up again when it is completely safe. You can easily write the angry email or make the firm phone call later. Strong personal boundaries don't always have to be loudly drawn with fire and yelling. Sometimes, the absolute wisest thing a human body can do is absolutely nothing. Heavy silence is truly never an embarrassing absence of personal strength. It is the ultimate biological survival tool, patiently waiting in the quiet dark. Learn to deeply trust the protective quiet that rushes over you. It is your oldest friend standing silently in front of the danger. It always knows exactly what it is doing to keep you perfectly safe.